For the record, will you please state your name?
Yes. It's Edward A. Klug.
And Mr. Klug, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
My current employment is Stiefel Nicholas.
Are you out of breath?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm going to have something marked as an exhibit. Just sit back and catch your breath. We didn't mean to have you run up here. I'd request that these be marked as 2 exhibits. Have you had an opportunity to catch your breath now, Mr.
Yes.
Klug? Okay. I show these items that are marked as exhibits S18 and S19.
Yes, that's correct.
I'm going to take these other exhibits out of here.
I'm sorry, could you tell me which one's 18 and which one's 19?
Which one is S18, Mr. Klug, and which one is S19?
S18 is the page that says he kept saying how she was unstable.
That's it.
Correct.
I got it.
Okay. You can just put those down. I just have those marked right now so you catch your breath.
Okay, thank you.
Now, according to the head notes or the heading on that, it says that you're vice president or something at Stiefel Nicholas?
Actually, I'm a senior vice president and co-branch manager.
And is that what it says on there? Is that the senior vice president and co-branch manager? Or
Actually, it says senior vice president investments branch manager.
okay. And how long have you been senior vice president and investments branch manager for Stiefel Nicholas?
I opened up the office September 30th of 1998, and I became branch manager after passing my Series 8, which is an NASD branch manager's exam, March of '99.
Sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Klug is looking at the statements, which may or may not be an issue, but I'd prefer that he not look at them until we're referring to them and have a chance to make a proper objection, if necessary, which it may or may
I'll
not
just
be.
take them, Counselor. It was like I said, I only had them marked now so that he could catch his breath. So
Sure.
we'll get to these in a little bit. So, Mr. Klug, before September of 1998, how were you employed?
I was employed as a senior vice president at Robert W. Baird & Company in the Appleton office until I started there in, December of 1990.
And that you were also a stockbroker there?
Correct. I was a senior vice president stockbroker.
And what kind of educational background do you have which qualifies you, or in training do you have that qualifies you for that position?
I have a bachelor's degree from Lakeland College in business administration with economics minor.
And how long have you been a stockbroker?
I've been a stockbroker since 1985.
Now, how is it that you came to go from Baird to, is it Stiefel Nicholas or Stiefel
It's
Nicholas?
Stiefel Nicholas and Company.
How is it that you decided to go from Baird to Stiefel Nicholas?
The management team that is currently running Stiefel Nicholas is 3 gentlemen that I had a lot of respect for that now are senior management at Stiefel Nicholas. So myself and my partner decided to transfer our business to Stiefel Nicholas.
And when you decided to do that, who was the contact person predominantly during that transition period?
The contact person would be Scott McCaig, and that's McCuaig.
And what is his position at Stiefel Nicholas
He
at
is
that time?
the president and national sales manager of Stiefel Financial Companies.
And did he have anybody that, or assign you to speak with anybody in Wisconsin regarding this transmission?
Yes,
transfer?
he had asked me to talk to a broker by the name of Mark Jensen. Mark had opened his office with the firm about 3 months before I was deciding to make the move to the new firm. So it's customary to talk to another representative who had made the transition a few months before you, just to talk out details and find out if the firm is what you're looking for to transfer your customers to.
And so did you speak with Mark Jensen?
Yes, I did.
Did you speak to him in person or over the telephone?
I talked to him over the telephone.
And when did you ever speak to him in person?
The first time that I had talked to Mark in person was when I met Mark at our Appleton branch during the initial transition, which would have been the first weekend in October of 1998.
And Mr. Klug, just so that you know, in this particular court, the judge would prefer that we refer to people by their full name as Mark Jensen or
sorry.
Mr. Jensen, rather than by their first name.
Mark Jensen, okay.
So do you see this person whom you've referred to as Mark Jensen anywhere in this courtroom today?
Yes, he's sitting over on in the middle of that table.
And Your Honor, thank you, Your Honor. So that's the first time, when was the first time you met Mark Jensen, actually talked to him in person?
The first time I had met Mark was either a Friday or a Saturday in the transition. He had come up from Racine to be there to help us in the transition.
Now, at that time, you weren't licensed to be a branch manager, is that true?
That's correct. He was my direct supervisor at that time. He would be signing all the forms, all the documents, making decisions on those types of compliance issues.
So he was like what you say, your direct supervisor, he was like your boss?
He was a boss. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so do you have an opportunity to talk to him very much during that transition period?
Well, during that transition period, it's very hectic because you're trying to contact your clients, you're trying to put together packets that go out to the customers so that the clients can sign and get their accounts over from the former firm. So I would have been on the phone a large amount of time, maybe at a few moments to talk to Mark.
And where was Mark during this period of time when this transition was taking place?
Mark was in one of the offices behind closed doors with another person, Kelly Labonte from St. Louis.
And did you know what they were doing behind those closed doors?
Well, it's one of those things where, it was...
if you know, tell me. If you don't know, then you don't know. Just know.
It
Tell
was
me what you know.
flirtatious.
Okay. And when was the next time you saw Mark Jensen after that?
The next time I saw Mark Jensen would be at our National Sales Convention, which was in St. Louis, Missouri, and that was from November 5th through November 7th, 1998.
And is that what they call it, a sales convention?
It was called the Blueprint for Success.
And tell us what transpires at the Blueprint for Success in November of 1998.
Sure. What the national sales meeting would be a series of speakers. You'd get educational credits. You would be listening to speakers about changes in the industry, new investments, rule changes. As well as getting to know other brokers in the financial system.
In order to be licensed as a stock trader, are you required to go to these continuing education classes?
There's what's called Firm Element, and Firm Element is continuing education that's required that each NASD firm, or it's now called FINRA. It's a self-regulatory organization that all the member firms belong to, and you're required to get so many Firm Element credits each year, as well as Firm Element credits for your license.
So you were attending at least ostensibly for that purpose?
Correct.
Now, in addition to the educational component, is there another component that transpires at these get-togethers?
Yes, there would also be camaraderie, the getting to know other brokers in the firm, socializing, meals, drinks, entertainment.
Now, by November of 1998, how long had you been with Stifel Nicolaus?
For about 5 weeks.
So did you know a lot of people there or not?
No, the only people that I knew was Mark Jensen, Ron Ruck, who were in my office, and there was a few other brokers that I knew who had made the transition to the firm. So, and the transition team that would have been at our office from St. Louis putting together the move from the other firm.
So during the course of this conference, did you have occasion to spend any time with Mark Jensen?
Yes, I did.
Tell us about the time you spent with Mark Jensen at this conference.
Well, this would have been, we would have had the meetings during the day. We would have had dinner. There would have been evening conversation, and then then I would have talked to Mark, and then later in the evening, it kind of filtered out to where. Mark and I were one of the few people that were left talking in the lobby of the hotel.
Well, let's start at the beginning of that day and proceed into that evening. At the beginning of the day, you were at the conference.
Yes.
Listening to speakers and learning about being a stock trader.
Correct.
And then there was dinner?
Then there was dinner. There also were breaks between speakers. So there would, you'd have a couple of breaks. You'd have lunch. And then, probably get done 5:30 at night.
And then after 5:30, was there a social hour before the dinner?
Yes, there would have been a social hour, networking hour to get to know people before the dinner.
So do you remember who you spoke to during the socializing hour?
I would have been with Mark. I would have talked to Mark.
Don't say what you would have been doing. Tell me what you did do. Do you remember were you with Mark or not?
Yes.
Yes. I would prefer it, and I know that people slip into it, but if the formal mode of address were used.
Were you with Mark Jensen or not, if you can remember?
We would have had cocktails and been with Mark. He would sat at our table and.
And was Mark Jensen sitting at the table with you when you had dinner or not?
Yes.
You know? Who else? Do you remember who else is at the table with you?
I would think Ron Ruck, because then, but beyond that, I don't.
What about Kelly Labonte? Can you state whether or not she was at the table with you? Do you remember?
I can't remember that. No.
Okay. So did you have any alcohol to drink before dinner or during dinner?
There would have been, yes.
Tell me what kind of stuff you would have had to drink before and after and during dinner.
Basically, I would have had a glass of wine during dinner. Before dinner, I would have had probably like a Crown Royal and Coke. I like.
Now, was this dinner and this cocktail hour, was it at the same hotel that you were staying at, or was it a different place?
It was at the St. Louis Marriott.
So you
same
didn't have
place.
You didn't have to drive anywhere after dinner?
No, we didn't.
Just have to get back up to your room?
Correct.
So before dinner, how many drinks would you say you had, if you can remember?
At that time, being a new company, I would have probably had a couple of drinks, and then I've also been known to put Coke in a glass and just have a straw, so that I wouldn't, have a lot of drinks.
You didn't want to make a fool out of yourself.
Correct, because I did not know anybody at the company.
Okay, and then how much did you have to drink during dinner, if you remember?
Just the glass of wine during dinner, so there was nothing else besides dinner.
And then after dinner, what happened?
After dinner, dinner would have lasted until about 9 o'clock. And then at that point, then we would have went down to the hotel lounge.
So did you go down to the hotel lounge?
Yes.
And when you went down to the hotel lounge, who did you go there with?
I was down there with the people that I had met at the firm, which would have been Ron Ruck, Mark Jensen, and I know there would have been some people from the what they call the ACATS team, which would have been the customer account transfer people that had come up to our home office. And there was some brokers from the Ohio branch that had opened a few months before we had opened.
And so you sat in the lounge with those folks?
Pardon?
You sat in the lounge with those folks?
Yes, we did. Yes, I did.
And you consumed additional alcoholic beverages?
Yes, I did.
You did, and they did as well?
Yes, correct.
And what were you folks talking about at that point?
But at that time, we were talking about the firm and our moves to the firm and what kind of struggles we had, what, getting to know, them personally.
And how long did everybody stay there before the people started filtering out?
It was there until, midnight, between midnight and bar closing.
Do you remember
2
what time bar closing was?
2 o'clock.
And toward the tail end of the evening, who was there?
Towards the end of the evening, it ended up where it was myself and Mark.
Nobody else?
Not that I can recall.
Now, was this before or after bar closing time?
That was after bar closing time.
So after bar closing time, you remained in the bar, or did you go somewhere else?
I actually had gone up. Well, actually, there was a coffee bar that after that, then we had started to drink some coffee, sitting around and talking with Mark.
Well, were you talking with Mark in the bar too, or just in the coffee bar?
I was talking to Mark, but our main conversation would have been in the lounge drinking coffee at that time.
In the coffee bar?
In the coffee bar.
So tell me about the conversation in the coffee bar. How did that get started, and what were you guys talking about?
Well, basically, it ended up becoming a point where, that started talking about wives, and the conversation got to the point where it ended up being a normal gripe session, a bitch session, to the where, you might have talked about having problems that you may have had in your marriage.
Okay. So do you remember who started complaining about whose wife first? Was it you or was it him, or do you remember?
I think it really was Mark, because I think Mark started talking about, his wife at that time, and I thought, well, here's somebody that I can talk to, but I think, he started opening up to me about his problems.
So then you started opening up to him about your problems?
Yes.
And so tell us, I understand that your wife's going to hear about this, and probably already has, so tell us what you said about your wife.
Yeah, well, basically, it goes back to before I was employed at Stiefel Nicholas, when I was working at Baird. Spring of 1997, I had filed for divorce against my wife, Joanne, who we're currently married and be celebrating our 25th anniversary. But at that time, I had become interested in my secretary at Baird, one of my assistants by the name of Stacy. And it became to the point where we were spending a lot of time together, going out, to happy hour and talking, and somebody that I could talk to and relate to. But it ended up, it was not a sexual affair. It was more of she was like a buddy that you could go out and have drinks with.
This is what you were telling Mark Jensen?
Yes.
And were you complaining about your wife in addition to talking about Stacy?
Yes, because it even though, you reconcile it, it's hard when you've talked about another woman in your relationship, to the point where, your spouse is always questioning you, and, so it ends up, being difficult, at that point once it moved back in.
So did you find Mark to be receptive or not receptive to what you were saying about your wife?
It was kind of like, I believe it was like he felt, Ed had a similar situation, his secretary, problems in his marriage, here's somebody that, I'm going to tell my story to.
So what did Mark tell you?
Mark told me how, that if you wanted to get rid of your wife, that you could go to websites that would tell you how to poison your wife, how to kill her, how it would not be detectable, how you could use Benadryl, antifreeze, things that that would not be detectable. So I, at that point, I found it interesting, so I was fascinated by what he was talking about.
Fascinated how?
Well, that somebody would be actually trying to kill their wife. I mean, it's something that I would never do. I mean, it would be, it was like so strange that, somebody that, was my coworker, a professional, college-educated man would be saying that, he wanted to get rid of his wife.
So he wasn't just telling you about how to do this in the abstract, he was
telling me that he was going to be doing that, that it was, it was bizarre.
Well, who was the first person you ever spoke to about this conversation?
Well, I had to excuse myself for a minute, and I went back up to my room and, used the restroom, and at that time, my wife had called, and we had a few-minute conversations, and I told her what was going on about my coworker, and it was like, I got to get back down there. And she says that my wife had, at that point, had said, you don't want to go back down there. The guys, don't get involved with him. It was like, she was warning me not to go down there, to not get involved.
But you went back down there anyway.
Yeah, because it was intriguing. I mean, it's the point that, I had never heard that in my life.
About what time was it that you had this conversation with your wife? Do you
That
remember?
would have been 2:30, between 2:30 and 3 in the morning.
So when you were in the room
Yes.
at that point, did you call her or did she call you?
She called me.
Your wife called you at 2:30 in the morning?
Yes.
Is this one of the things that irritated you about her, that she was calling you at 2:30 in the morning?
Well, it was, that didn't irritate me at that point, because whenever I am out of town, we've always made a point to talk at the end of the night, to just check on, how the kids are doing, how our day is, but at that point I didn't even, want to hear any of that. It was like, so then I think there was 2 or 3 calls at that point, that she kept calling me back. I don't know, we'd have to look at the timeline.
Well, but after this first conversation that you had with your wife, did you have another conversation with her first, or did you go back downstairs right away? Or do you remember?
I think she called me right back, and then it was either 1 or 2 calls at that point. Then I went back down to the lobby.
And was Mark still there?
Yes, he was.
And what did you guys talk about that?
We continued to talk about the fact that because my wife said, well, how can you kill somebody with Benadryl? Mark told me that if, the dose is over a long period of time, it's relatively undetectable, that in your body it starts crystallizing you from the inside out.
The Benadryl or something else?
The Benadryl plus the antifreeze.
He told you the antifreeze would start to crystallize over a
Correct.
period of time inside the body?
Correct. And that it would relatively be undetectable.
And was this before you went up and talked to your wife, or after you come back down after talking to your wife, or don't you remember?
It was, I think he had said some both times, because when I went back up to the room, that's when I had to, she couldn't believe that you could kill somebody with Benadryl.
So it was when you went back down, then he explained.
Yeah, then he went back, then it was more, he elaborated more on the antifreeze part of it.
You didn't tell him you'd talk to your wife about it, did you?
I didn't, no.
You didn't say, my wife wants to know how you'd kill somebody with... Okay. Well, did you have to cross-examine him to get this out of him? And was it difficult?
No, he was talking freely. It was like, here, I've got a kindred soul that I can talk to about somebody that at that point maybe hated his wife, or, the alcohol may have got to the point where, it might have, say, hey, this person will listen to what I have to say.
This was November...
This would have been November of 1998.
Well, you remember what day of the week this was?
That would have been a Friday night.
Into Saturday morning?
Actually, yes, and yes, correct.
And so...
Well, was there a qualification? Did you say or?
I guess the dates are a little confusing, because it may have been a Thursday night into Friday. It was one of the nights that we were there. But then I know the next day, I talked to my wife in the airport, so it would have been it would have been Friday, I believe, Friday night.
Into Saturday morning.
Correct.
So how long did you stay up and talk to Mark Jensen?
I was. It was at least till 4 in the morning.
Did the conference continue into Saturday morning, or was it over Saturday morning?
There would have been a Saturday morning session.
Did you make the Saturday morning session?
Yes, I did. I never miss any of my meetings because I take my profession seriously, and I would have been, we would have had.
I object to answering the question.
All right, let's break at this point, and I'm going to ask that you return at a little longer today, 1:30. And please don't talk about the case during the break.
Please all rise. Good afternoon, Mr. Klug. And I believe that when we left off, the last question or last answer had pertained to were you able to make the Saturday morning session, even though you'd been up until 4 o'clock Saturday morning. And what was the answer to that question?
Yes, I was at the meeting.
Before you went to the meeting, did you stop off and talk to anybody?
Yes, I stopped up and met my partner, Ron Ruck.
And what did you tell your partner, Ron Ruck?
He had asked what I was doing the previous night, and I had told him that I was with Mark in the hotel lobby, and told Ron that Mark and I had been up all night because Mark had told me that he wanted to kill his wife.
And did you say it like that? Were you serious like that, or did you say it in a different fashion?
You know, I did say it in a serious tone, but yes. And you know, and like I said, I thought, you know, Ron had.
Objection. It's beyond the scope of the question.
That's really the question is objection, unless it's irrelevant, it's overrelevant.
It's hard for me to know because he's just going on.
Go ahead and ask a question, Mr. Janbois.
Thank you, Your Honor. So then you went to the morning session?
That's correct.
Did you see Mark Jensen that morning, or do you remember seeing him?
I don't remember seeing Mark at that point.
And then later that day you flew back to Wausau?
Actually flew back to Appleton.
Appleton. And did you talk to your wife again that day?
Yes. On the way home at the airport in St. Louis, I had made a call to her from a payphone, and just wanted to check in with her and let her know, you know, that I was on my way. And then we had talked about what had happened again the night before.
Well, to the extent that you can remember it, tell me what you said to her and what she said to you about what had happened the night before.
Well, basically, she was. I had talked to her about what had happened, you know, about Mark, and you know, telling me that he wanted to, you know, kill his wife, and she kept questioning me about how can Benadryl kill somebody. You know, she was just questioning me on that, and it was, you know, I had we talked for I think about 7 or 8 minutes. So we rehashed what had gone on the night before.
Well, did you tell her what you knew about how Benadryl could kill somebody?
Yes. Basically,
What did you tell her that you knew?
I had told her that it was, what Mark had told me was that it was a chemical that could be not easily detected, and that, that it crystallized you from the inside out.
Did he say what chemical that was? Was that Benadryl or some other chemical?
It was ethylene glycol.
So you specifically mentioned the words ethylene glycol to your wife.
Because my wife did not know how Benadryl could kill somebody, so I told her that Benadryl has the same properties of antifreeze.
Now, Mr. Klug, I'll remind you of something, that it's important for you to allow me to finish my question before you start to answer, because the reporter can't take both of us down at the same time.
Yep, I understand.
The court reporter asked me to remind you of that. Now, so when you got back to your office or back to your home, did you talk to anybody else about this conversation that had occurred between you and Mark Jensen?
When I got back to the office, I ended up talking to my assistant.
And who is your assistant?
Stacy Bauer. And
was there anybody else that you spoke to besides Stacy Bauer?
Joan Colby.
And what was her position?
Joan was also my assistant.
And what do you recall, if anything, telling Stacy Bauer and Joan Kolb about this conversation that had occurred between you and Mark Jensen?
I told them about the conversation that we had in the hotel lobby about the fact that Mark had wanted to kill his wife and the fact that he wanted to use the Benadryl and the poisons, and just kind of a unbelievable story that they wanted to ask about.
How long would you say you spent telling them about this conversation?
Probably would have been a 5 to 10 minute conversation.
And you never raised it with them again after that?
No, I didn't. Not until about a month later when Mark's wife had died.
How did you hear about Julie Jensen dying?
I had been to Boston the week from November 30th to about December. November 30th to about December 5th, that first week of December '98, for a training session to get my branch manager's license. It was a cram course. So when I got back that following Monday in December, that's when I had gotten a call from Mark Jensen telling me that his wife had died.
Now, at the time that you received this phone call from Mark Jensen, did you at that time remember the conversation that you'd had with Mark Jensen back about a month earlier in St. Louis?
Yes, I did, but I did not bring it up to him. I had offered condolences to him with the young children that he had.
Now, I just have to ask this question. Why didn't you bring it up? I mean, why would you not raise this issue? He had just told you a month earlier he wanted to kill his wife by poisoning her, and then he tells you his wife is dead, and you offer him condolences instead of confronting him?
Well, I was afraid of Mark. I guess he was my direct supervisor. I think he wanted to make me think that we had forgotten about the conversation because he never brought it up ever again.
And you never raised it with him?
And I never brought it up with him. I was hoping that he would forget that I knew about what he had said.
So you'd found out about Julie's death from Mark Jensen, and then you disclosed that to your staff?
Yes.
So what happened when and these were the same staff members whom you had a month earlier been telling about this conversation?
Correct.
And when you told your staff that Julie Jensen had died, what was the reaction?
I believe the reaction at that point was, Stacy had said that, oh my God, he did kill her. It's like, what I had told them was, what had come to fruition at that point.
Now, when you heard that, didn't that maybe alert you to the notion that perhaps you should contact somebody with a badge and a gun and a uniform?
And that like I'd mentioned, I guess I had not wanted to get involved at that point.
And why is it you didn't want to get involved at that point?
Well, Mark was my direct supervisor. He was signing off on all my trades, all my new accounts. I didn't, was transferring my business to the firm. If he was capable of killing his wife, what would he do to me?
So it's because you were afraid?
Yes.
After you heard about Julie's death, did you discuss this issue with anybody other than with your clerical staff?
I had talked to my wife and told her that, Julie had died.
And when you disclosed this to your wife, this is the same woman who a month earlier had been telling her about these conversations. What was your wife's reaction?
I wonder if... would you gentlemen come up for a moment?
So the question was, here a month earlier you've been talking to your wife about this, about what Mark had told you about wanting to kill his wife, about planning to kill his wife. And now she's dead. And when you discussed this with your wife, what was her reaction to that?
My wife at that point said whatever my decision was at that point, she would stand behind me.
Decision regarding what?
If I wanted to go to the authorities or, get involved.
So at that point, you did discuss with her the proposition of going to the authorities.
Yes.
And she didn't counsel you one way or the other. She just said whatever you did.
Sustained.
Well, did she counsel you one way or the other?
No, she didn't. She said whatever my decision was at that point was up to me.
And so your decision at that point was to do what?
To not get involved.
And how do you feel about that decision today?
Objection to relevance?
Is sustained, or sustained.
Well, at some later point, you became aware of the fact that Mr. Jensen had been charged, correct?
That's correct.
And how did you become aware of the fact that Mark Jensen had been charged with this criminal offense?
Well, Mark had been communicating with me between the time of his wife's death and the time that I was not he was not my direct supervisor.
And what was he talking to you about?
Well, he had told me that the insurance company was not going to pay because they were questioning the death,
And did that cause you to think that perhaps I should contact the insurance company or I should contact somebody with a badge and a uniform?
I didn't, no. I mean, like I said, I did not want to get involved.
And then at some later time, did you hear of Mark Jensen being charged with this criminal offense?
Yes, it was in 2002. We had heard that Mark was accused of killing his wife in 2002.
Not just accused, but charged.
Charged.
And at that point, did it seem to you that perhaps it would
Yes.
Remember, you got to let me finish the question. Did it seem advisable to you that perhaps it was your duty as a citizen to pick up the telephone and call the police?
Yes.
And did you pick up the telephone and call the police and tell them what you knew about this case?
Yes. What I had done is I had called the branch manager of our Green Bay office, Quinn Yorton. Quinn, at one point before he became a police officer, before he became a broker, was a detective or police officer. So I had wanted to talk to him before I had called and where I had called was the district attorney's office, and I had told the person that I had talked to that Mark was in our office. You may want to come up and check our computers. So it was kind of like a half-hearted, come up and talk to me.
Well, now, Mr. Klug, please listen to the question, because the question I asked you was, did you call a law enforcement agency, either the DA's office or a police department, and tell them what you knew about this case? Now, did you call a law enforcement agency or a DA's office and tell them what you knew about this case?
I called, but I did not tell them what I knew about the case.
You concede that the information that you gave to them, that he was in the office, he'd used the computers,
Yes.
that kind of information would probably not elicit as much interest from a law enforcement agency as I talked to him, he told me he was planning to murder his wife.
Right. I guess I had thought, well, maybe at that point, maybe there would have been somebody that would have questioned me, or, I could have then started talking, because I was scared. I didn't know how to get involved. I have never been involved with the judicial system.
So it goes back to that issue of being fearful,
Yes.
being frightened.
Correct.
When was the first time that you actually spoke with a law enforcement officer or a representative of a district attorney's office and told that law enforcement officer or district attorney or assistant district attorney what Mark Jensen had actually told you about murdering his wife?
That would have been in July of 2007. I had talked to the assistant DA, Gabriella.
This assistant DA seated to my right, Angelina Gabrielle?
Yes, correct. I'm sorry. Yes.
You spoke to her over the telephone?
Yes, she had called me on a Friday afternoon, and yes,
And I was present at that time also?
yes, you were.
And that's the first time you'd spoken to me about this case?
That's correct.
And the first time you'd spoken to Angelina Gabrielle about this case?
Yes.
So in fact, you never did actually contact law enforcement or a DA's office and tell them what you knew about the case. Somebody else contacted you, and then you told them?
That's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Klug, I don't have any more questions for you. Your Honor, I know that ordinarily at this point, Mr. Elby would commence cross-examination, but Mr. Elby and I have discussed the fact that we have two other witnesses who are relatively short witnesses and whom we would like to take out of order and have them come in and testify, and then allow Mr. Elby the opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Klug.
All right, is that correct, Mr. Albee?
It is, Judge.
All right, you can step down.
Thank you.
For the time being.
Mr. Klug, please don't discuss your testimony with anybody else. And just, there's a conference room right outside the door here, and you can wait there, okay? Your Honor, the state will call Dave Wilkinson to the stand. I'll get him.